Dear friends, it is said that the road to ruin is often paved with good intentions and small, unnoticed missteps. If our faith is to remain vibrant and authentic, we must occasionally pause, turn our gaze inward, and ask, what habits of mine might be leading me away from the life I am called to live? Let us today examine 7 subtle but corrosive habits that threaten our spiritual growth and, more importantly, how we might begin to overcome them. 1. Neglecting prayer. The first and perhaps most common habit is the neglect of prayer. Prayer is not merely a ritual but the lifeline of the soul to its Creator. When we set it aside, be it out of busyness, laziness, or indifference, we weaken the very foundation of our faith. To neglect prayer is to silence the voice of God in our hearts. Let us resolve to restore this sacred practice to its rightful place in our lives. 2. Harboring resentment. Few things can wither the soul like resentment. When we clutch grievances tightly, refusing to forgive, we invite bitterness to dwell in our hearts. Resentment turns us inward, away from the grace of God and the love of neighbor. Forgiveness is not a suggestion but a command, and a gift that liberates both the forgiver and the forgiven. 3. Indulging in gossip. The idle tongue is a small but powerful force for harm. Gossip may feel harmless, even entertaining, but it distorts truth and sows discord. As followers of Christ, we are called to build others up, not tear them down. Let our words, then, be as seeds of encouragement, not thorns of division. 4. Pursuing self-glorification. There is a quiet but insidious habit of seeking recognition for oneself. Whether through achievements, appearances, or influence, the desire for self-glorification conflicts with the call to humility. The one who follows Christ must learn to say, not to us, but to your name be the glory. 5. Being complacent in faith. Complacency is a slow poison. When we stop seeking, questioning, and striving to grow in our faith, we allow apathy to take root. A faith that is not nurtured will wither like an untended garden. Let us strive to remain vigilant, eager to deepen our knowledge and relationship with God. 6. Neglecting service to others. A life of faith without acts of love and service is hollow. The gospel calls us to action, to feed the hungry, clothe the naked, and comfort the brokenhearted. If we turn inward, focusing only on our own needs, we miss the heart of our calling. 7. Succumbing to fear. Fear is a potent adversary of faith. When we allow fear to govern our choices, we lose sight of the sovereignty of God. Faith invites us to trust, even when the path ahead is uncertain. Courage, after all, is not the absence of fear but the resolve to act in spite of it. Practical steps for renewal. Now, having identified these habits, let us not despair but act. Begin with prayer, ask God to reveal and help you uproot any harmful tendencies. Engage in reflection and accountability, seeking the counsel of trusted mentors. Replace each harmful habit with its virtuous counterpart, prayer with diligence, resentment with forgiveness, and so forth. The subtle power of habits. Habits are the quiet architects of our lives, shaping our thoughts, actions, and ultimately, our character. They are formed not in a single, defining moment but through the small, repeated decisions we make each day. Like water carving a path through stone, habits wear grooves into our lives, determining the ease with which we follow a particular course. Yet, their subtlety is what makes them so powerful, and so dangerous. We often underestimate their influence because they develop gradually, almost imperceptibly, until they become second nature. Consider the simple act of waking up each morning. For some, it begins with a prayer of gratitude, a moment to align the heart with the divine. For others, the day starts with an anxious glance at emails or social media, setting a tone of distraction and unrest. Neither choice feels monumental in the moment, yet repeated over weeks, months, and years, these habits can shape a person's spiritual life profoundly. One cultivates a sense of connection and purpose, the other, a pattern of scattered focus and dependency on external validation. The power of habits lies in their consistency. What we do regularly becomes who we are. A person who habitually seeks truth and practices integrity becomes trustworthy, while one who indulges in dishonesty erodes their own sense of self-worth and credibility. These patterns ripple outward, affecting relationships, decisions, and even faith itself. The slow, steady nature of habit formation can lead us either toward virtue or vice. It is this dual potential that demands our attention. What makes habits particularly dangerous is that they often operate beneath the surface of our conscious awareness. Rarely do we stop to evaluate why we do what we do. A habit, once formed, becomes a kind of default mode, an automatic response to familiar stimuli. While this efficiency can be helpful, imagine having to relearn how to drive a car or tie your shoes every day. It also means that destructive habits can persist unchecked, gradually undermining our spiritual and moral integrity. Take, for example, the habit of complaining. At first, it may seem harmless to vent frustrations about a difficult situation or a challenging person. But over time, habitual complaining can foster a spirit of ingratitude and negativity. The more we complain, the more our perspective narrows, focusing on what is wrong rather than what is good. This shift in mindset doesn't just affect us, it influences those around us, spreading dissatisfaction like a contagion. All the while, the habit strengthens, becoming harder to recognize and resist. The subtlety of habits also makes them resistant to change. It is far easier to adopt a new habit than to break an old one. This is because habits are not merely behavioral patterns, they are deeply intertwined with our thoughts, emotions, and even neurological pathways. The brain, in its desire for efficiency, builds shortcuts for habitual actions, making them feel almost effortless. Undoing these pathways requires intentional effort, persistence, and often, a reordering of priorities. The same mechanisms that make habits difficult to break also make them powerful tools for transformation. When we consciously choose to cultivate good habits, we harness their subtle power for good. Imagine replacing a habit of grumbling with one of gratitude. At first, it may feel unnatural to give thanks in moments of difficulty. But as the practice becomes habitual, gratitude begins to reshape the heart and mind, fostering resilience, joy, and a deeper awareness of God's blessings. The subtle power of habits is also a testament to the importance of vigilance in our spiritual lives. Scripture often speaks of guarding the heart, for it is the wellspring of life. In the same way, we must guard our habits, for they flow from the heart and shape its inclinations. A neglected habit of prayer can erode a sense of intimacy with God, while a cultivated habit of generosity can open the heart to divine grace. These small, daily choices have eternal significance, even if they seem inconsequential at the time. The importance of reflection. Reflection is a discipline that, though often overlooked, holds the power to transform the human soul. It is a deliberate pause, a moment to step back from the relentless flow of life and examine its direction, choices, and underlying motives. In the rush of daily living, it is easy to drift, carried along by habits, routines, and external demands without ever considering whether they align with our deepest values or the divine purpose for our lives. Reflection breaks this cycle, offering clarity and insight into the state of our hearts and the trajectory of our actions. The act of reflection is, at its core, an acknowledgement of human fallibility. It begins with the humble recognition that we are prone to error, often deceived by our own desires, biases, and blind spots. Without regular self-examination, it becomes all too easy to justify harmful behaviors or ignore areas of spiritual neglect. Reflection acts as a mirror, revealing not only our shortcomings but also the potential for growth and renewal. It allows us to see ourselves as we truly are, stripped of pretense, and invites us to realign with the truth. In an age of constant connectivity, where every spare moment is filled with screens, notifications, and noise, the quiet introspection required for reflection is often drowned out. This relentless busyness not only robs us of peace but also makes it nearly impossible to recognize the deeper patterns shaping our lives. Reflection, therefore, requires intentionally. It demands that we carve out sacred spaces of stillness, free from the demands of the world, to listen to the whispers of conscience and the voice of God. Human behavior is rarely as straightforward as it seems, and even our noblest actions can be tainted by selfishness, pride, or fear. For instance, a seemingly generous act may be driven by a desire for recognition rather than genuine love for others. Reflection helps us peel back these layers, exposing the true motivations behind our choices. It is an invitation to examine not only what we do but why we do it, and to align our motives with the higher calling of humility, love, and faithfulness. Reflection also plays a crucial role in identifying and addressing harmful habits. These patterns of thought and behavior, which often develop unconsciously, can exert a powerful influence on our lives. Left unchecked, they can lead us away from the virtues we aspire to embody. Through reflection, we gain the awareness needed to recognize these habits and their impact. It is only by shining the light of awareness on them that we can begin the work of transformation, replacing destructive tendencies with practices that nurture spiritual growth. In addition to examining our inner lives, reflection invites us to consider our relationships with others. How do we treat those around us? Are we living as instruments of grace and reconciliation, or do we contribute to division and strife? Reflection challenges us to confront the ways in which we may have hurt others, whether through words, actions, or neglect, and to seek forgiveness and restoration. It also encourages us to recognize and celebrate the good in others, fostering gratitude and deeper connections. Reflection is not a solitary endeavor but one that is deeply enriched by the wisdom of others. Engaging in honest conversations with trusted mentors, friends, or spiritual guides can provide valuable perspectives that we might otherwise miss. These dialogues act as a sounding board, helping us to process our thoughts and gain clarity on complex issues. In this way, reflection becomes a communal practice, rooted in the shared pursuit of truth and accountability. The transformative power of reflection lies in its ability to bridge the gap between intention and action. It is not enough to have good intentions, they must be translated into tangible choices and behaviors. Reflection serves as the catalyst for this process, illuminating the areas where our lives fall short of our ideals and inspiring us to take the necessary steps toward change. Whether it is a commitment to greater kindness, honesty, or discipline, reflection provides the clarity and resolve needed to pursue these virtues with intention. Habit 1: Neglecting prayer. Neglecting prayer is one of the most insidious habits that can erode the foundation of a Christian life. Prayer is not just a ritual or obligation. It is the vital connection between the soul and God, the means through which we communicate, commune, and draw strength. To neglect prayer is to sever the lifeline that sustains spiritual growth, leaving the heart vulnerable to the distractions and pressures of the world. Despite its significance, this habit often creeps in unnoticed, masked by the demands of daily life or a false sense of self-sufficiency. The habit of neglecting prayer often begins subtly, with excuses that seem reasonable. "I'm too busy, I'll pray later," or "God already knows my needs" become common justifications for skipping this sacred practice. Over time, these small lapses accumulate, creating a pattern of disconnection. What starts as an occasional oversight can quickly harden into a habit, distancing us from the source of wisdom, peace, and guidance. The irony is that the very busyness or stress that we cite as reasons for neglecting prayer are the very conditions that prayer is meant to address. Prayer is more than a list of petitions, it is a relationship. When we neglect prayer, we miss the opportunity to nurture our relationship with God. Just as any human relationship weakens without regular communication, so too does our spiritual connection suffer when we fail to spend time in God's presence. The result is a gradual spiritual dryness, a sense of distance from the divine that can lead to feelings of isolation, confusion, and even despair. This is not because God withdraws from us, but because we, in neglecting prayer, withdraw from Him. Prayer has the unique ability to realign our hearts and minds with God's truth. In a world filled with competing voices and priorities, it is easy to become overwhelmed or distracted by the immediate and the urgent. Prayer draws us back to what is eternal, reminding us of God's sovereignty, love, and purpose. Without it, we are more likely to be swayed by fear, doubt, or selfish desires, losing sight of the greater calling on our lives. Neglecting prayer also weakens our ability to resist temptation and make wise choices. Scripture reminds us to pray without ceasing, 1 Thessalonians 5:17, and to watch and pray so that we do not fall into temptation, Matthew 26:41. Prayer is a source of spiritual strength, equipping us to face challenges and discern God's will in difficult situations. When we neglect it, we are like soldiers entering battle without armor, vulnerable to the attacks of doubt, discouragement, and sin. The habit of neglecting prayer affects not only our relationship with God but also our relationships with others. Prayer is a powerful act of intercession, allowing us to lift up the needs and burdens of those around us. When we neglect this practice, we miss the opportunity to be a source of spiritual support and encouragement for others. Furthermore, prayer has a transformative effect on our own hearts, cultivating empathy, patience, and love. Without it, our interactions with others are more likely to be driven by selfishness or impatience rather than the grace and compassion that come from a heart attuned to God. The habit of neglecting prayer also stems from a misconception about its nature and purpose. Some view prayer as a transactional act, merely a way to ask for blessings or solutions to problems. When these expectations are not met, frustration or disappointment can lead to neglect. In reality, prayer is not about changing God's mind but about aligning our hearts with His will. It is an act of trust and surrender, a way of acknowledging our dependence on Him and inviting His presence into every aspect of our lives. Recovering from the habit of neglecting prayer requires intentional effort and a renewed perspective. It begins with recognizing prayer as a gift, not a burden, an invitation to enter into the presence of the Creator who delights in communion with His children. Small, consistent steps can help re-establish the habit, setting aside specific times for prayer, creating a dedicated space, or incorporating prayer into daily routines. Journaling prayers, meditating on Scripture, or using written prayers can also provide structure and focus for those struggling to re-engage. In addition to these practical steps, it is essential to approach prayer with honesty and humility. There is no need for elaborate words or perfect formulas. God desires sincerity above all. Whether in moments of joy, sorrow, doubt, or gratitude, coming to Him as we are is enough. As we persevere, we begin to experience the richness of a prayerful life, a deepening sense of peace, clarity, and intimacy with God that sustains us through every season. Habit 2, harboring resentment. Harboring resentment is a silent but corrosive habit that can take root in the heart and erode both personal peace and spiritual health. Resentment begins with a perceived wrong, perhaps an unkind word, an act of betrayal, or a failure to meet expectations. In its early stages, it may seem justified, even natural, to hold on to feelings of anger or hurt. However, when these emotions are allowed to linger, they transform into bitterness, hardening the heart and creating a barrier to forgiveness and reconciliation. The danger of resentment lies in its ability to consume our thoughts and emotions. When we replay offenses in our minds, dwelling on the pain they caused, we give them power over us. This mental and emotional preoccupation not only amplifies the hurt but also blinds us to the blessings and opportunities for growth in our lives. Resentment becomes a lens through which we view the world, coloring our perceptions and interactions with others. Instead of seeing people as they are, we begin to define them solely by their faults, allowing past wounds to dictate present relationships. Resentment also has a profound impact on our relationship with God. Forgiveness is at the heart of the Christian faith, and harboring resentment places us in direct opposition to this central tenet. When we refuse to forgive, we hinder the flow of God's grace in our lives. Jesus' words in the Lord's Prayer, "Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us," serve as a powerful reminder that forgiveness is both a gift we receive and a command we are called to obey. Resentment blocks this cycle, creating spiritual stagnation and robbing us of the joy and freedom found in grace. Resentment often leads to isolation. The bitterness it fosters creates walls between ourselves and others, making genuine connection and intimacy difficult. Over time, relationships that could have been healed through forgiveness become strained or broken, leaving us lonelier and more entrenched in our pain. The irony is that the very act of holding on to resentment, often seen as a form of self-protection, ultimately causes greater harm by alienating us from the people and support systems we need most. Resentment is not only spiritually damaging but also harmful to our physical and emotional well-being. Studies have shown that chronic bitterness and anger can contribute to stress, anxiety, and even physical health issues such as high blood pressure and weakened immunity. These effects underscore the interconnectedness of mind, body, and spirit, reminding us that habits of the heart have far-reaching consequences. Harboring resentment burdens us with a weight that we were never meant to carry, one that diminishes our capacity to live fully and freely. When we hold on to anger, we may feel as though we are standing up for ourselves, preserving our dignity, or demanding accountability from those who have wronged us. While justice is a noble pursuit, resentment is not the path to achieving it. Instead, it traps us in a cycle of negativity, preventing us from moving forward and seeking resolution in healthy, constructive ways. True justice is best pursued with a heart free from bitterness, one that is open to reconciliation and healing.